Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam. Ask Adam is an acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. One thing I've found in this life that I'm living, and I'm sure the one you're living as well, is that the more you know, the more you can handle a situation. The more you know about something, the more you can effectively move forward, react, or know when to just lie back, kind of let that wave pass. Well, I've become a pretty strong proponent of seeking knowledge. And I know many people out there have quoted some biblical statements to me saying, well, knowing too much isn't good. Yeah, I know. I grew up in the same house and can relate to some degree that knowledge, to know something about something quite possibly can be not so good, but by stepping back and not being all knowing or fully knowing about many situations, I gotta say, has kind of made my life a little bit more difficult. So I will go to the mat with you that, um, yeah, the tree of knowledge has got to mean something else, biblically speaking. And I'm just not a scholar to go that far into it, but I can say that a lot less has happened to me because I know a lot more. And I also chalk that up to experience. Anyway, I digress. This particular episode is under the category of secrets of strategic planning. The secrets of strategic planning, specifically mastering the steps for effective execution, which again falls right in line with what I'm saying. Effective execution comes from, quite frankly, knowing things. And hopefully at the end of this episode, you will have learned and understood and or even created that spark that had you seeking knowledge. To dive a little bit deeper into this for your own understanding, how you can effectively execute specifically things, well, in your business. And quite frankly, I've found that both have gone hand in hand. What I've learned in my personal life, I've applied to business. What I've applied to business, I have, or what I've learned in business, I've applied to my personal life, and vice versa. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you my 7 elements of this mastery and allow you to do just that. First of all, strategic planning is more than just creating a vision statement. It's a systematic process that ensures every action aligns with your organization's long-term objectives. By breaking the process into clear steps and knowing what each step entails, you can drive meaningful progress and adapt proactively to change your environment. And here are the 7 key stages, along with some actions that I've found have effectively worked. First of all, define your vision and purpose. Simon Sinek said, most definitely, clarify your why, understanding your why. Start by articulating your core reason for your organization and why it exists. What is it that you're doing? What is the impact that you are basically putting forth out into this world? A strong, inspiring vision and mission statement can keep your team really aligned and motivated. I found many times in my business that each time not only we sat down for office meetings, it was clear to every one of us what it was we were doing, the customers we were looking for, and the impact that we were going to make on the community. And I found that to be extremely successful. How a small, in this instance, was the real estate brokerage firm that I owned with some partners, that we literally went head to head with a name brand on Main Street, and we were equally as competitive. And I will say why that was, is because each one of the agents that participated with us understood from day one, and they adopted into their independent business under our umbrella these core facts of why, what we were doing, what we wanted to do. And I will say a little of it was frustration based on some of the, I guess, rules that were adopted by other offices. Like, I'll give you, for example, one of the things that was frustrating is we were in a tri-state location. There was technically 4 states or 3 states surrounding us, including the center state being ourselves in the mid-Atlantic area of the United States. And it really, within an arm's reach, we really had about 3 counties that we could cover as far as our real estate sales. But just a short distance to the north and a short distance to the south was 2 other states that I was a huge proponent to have agents licensed in those neighboring states. I mean, that only benefited our business and our reach. And sure, there was agencies that were up there to give you that hometown feel. But we also were providing a service and cutting edge online presence and social media presence and all of the stuff that's become quite popular today. We were implementing where others weren't. This being said, we were able to compete with them by having that broader range, by having that larger stretch. They didn't necessarily allow it. And quite frankly, it wasn't until a couple years after we implemented our actions that they kind of realized what we did, and they jumped into the same boat and started rowing with us. You also want to keep in mind your long-term impact. Go beyond the basic financial goals and think about the value that you aim to bring to customers and stakeholders. You know, the higher level purpose that you serve basically is the compass for all of your strategic decisions. So again, by being the best firm, and we told ourselves that, quite frankly, even before we were the best, we were having those conversations that we were the best. And when we looked at each business decision, whether it was an administrative assistant, whether it was looking at the marketing and advertising budget, and even things that we did that basically put our office on the map, if it was beneficial to us and to the agents and aligned with our purpose and what we saw for ourselves in the future, we did it. Quite frankly, it kind of justified some of the expenses at the time because certain things just weren't cheap. Now, basically, the internet has some level of freeness. At the time, it did cost some money to get that strategic positioning. The other thing we did consistently, I guess to stay on this same subject, is we conducted a thorough situational analysis, right? An internal assessment. We evaluated our organization's strength and our weaknesses, right? And if there was a certain level of weakness, it wasn't necessarily just trimming the branch, it was maybe helping strengthen that branch. I remember one of the agents was kind of struggling, and they were new, and I realized we kind of went on a limb to bring them in, but they also held a certain level of energy. And that was what I knew we could grow with and help them to grow by giving them the tools to make themselves the best agent they could be. And they did. They showed up every day with their A game and constantly wanted to move forward, constantly wanted to do the best they could. And they did. They needed some additional coaching, and we were able to provide that to them. We also recommended that, you know, our certain capabilities when things, got a little busy and we didn't always have time for that coaching was knowing who to recommend and who to direct them to get that next level of coaching. We also provided, some internal processes that helped ensure that they were going to be the best agent, to be compliant with state regulations and beyond, just to be a good agency. In the real estate world, the state does have the authority to show up at your office almost at any given time. And they like to do it kind of on a regular basis, is to basically check in on your checkbook. And the fact that our files looked so good and that our account of basically other people's money was spot on, that I think they, to some degree, adjusted some of the standards to say, oh, we would like to see more of this, we would like to see more of that from other agencies based on what we provided. We also took an external view, identifying the opportunities and the threats in the market from the competition and from those industry trends and the regulatory factors, even the economic conditions. This was during the time of that financial crisis back in 2008 that I participated with this office and in real estate. And it wasn't easy to make certain decisions, but we weren't looking at the situation at hand, the certain market conditionings at the time, which, lots of foreclosures and things weren't the best. But it didn't stop us from making those strategic decisions because we were looking long term. We were looking at what the future of business was going to look like and where we wanted to be in position with that future. Also looking at, some of the economics of the area, social, technological trends, legal and environment. All of these are a factor outside of, even political, dare I say, are outside of your business, but you still need to be aware of them. So conduct your thorough situational analysis, both internally and externally. You want to establish clear objectives, translating your vision into goals. Craft specific, measurable objectives based on insights from your situational analysis. So what, again, kind of following with the real estate is, where do you want to be at the end of the year? How do you want to adjust your business? Do you want more? Do you want it to cost a little bit less in business so that you're able to start creating more of that profit margin? And again, these objectives should be time bound, directly connected to your vision. If you want to increase your market share by a certain percent, put a date on it. Say, I want to reach this goal by this time. We go back to the SMART goal system where it's simple and manageable with a time and that they're relevant. You also want to prioritize some of these goals because not all goals have the same weight. I like to use kind of a scoring method or strategic criteria to help determine, which ones to tackle first. If it's something that requires a heavy financial load, maybe it needs to be broken up into pieces or give you time to save up as a business to then tackle that larger item. But it doesn't mean that you should put all your eggs in that basket and focus just on that if there's other smaller objectives that can be handled, that you can kind of work through. Focus on your resources. and initiatives with the greatest potential for transformation and growth. I know one of the, again, we implemented smaller training sessions or in and around some of the office meetings that helped give our agents a little bit more of an edge. This edge gave them not only the confidence to go in the market, but it also gave them the edge over the competitors. So they had something new to bring to our customers and clients. Now, of course, with the internet at the time and social sites and whatnot, that eventually, people outside of our office were going to start implementing some of these strategies and learning, oh, well, this office does this office does that. Here's our extra that we bring to our clients and customers. Well, once they kind of understood what that was, they started implementing it as well. So you always kind of have to be on that cutting edge, if you will, of, what's the next thing that's going to appease your clients and customers? What is the next, extra thing that you can provide to your clients and customers that's going to say, yes, I want to work with you? And prioritize on those. And those were the little steps we took that then created additional sales, that created more income for the business, that then allowed us to tackle the bigger tasks like, some advertising space, some radio marketing, some postings on billboards, getting out there at another level that others weren't. I always found it interesting that so many of the fellow competitors that we were dealing with, they thought just having their storefront on Main Street was good enough. That was enough exposure. And I challenged them that the exposure was having more signs in the county, having more signs in the yards of other properties in those surrounding states and counties, having multiple licensed agents. That's what led to really the transformation of business, is that in those other states, somebody saw the sign and went, oh, I didn't know you were up here. But since you are, could you sell our property? Could you help us find something in this neighborhood? So again, tackling some of those smaller things like getting agents licensed and trained helped lead to more sales, to then billboards, to then magazines, to publishing, to more of an online presence. So the next item is formulate your strategy. Choose a strategic approach. Decide how you will compete and stand out. What's the cost of your leadership? What's the cost of this differentiation or niche that you're specializing in? Like I said, I had one agent that specifically just loved land. They were all about property, farm property, large acreage property. That was really what they specialized in. That was kind of their niche. That was their network. Well, that was a great resource to have. And quite frankly, when some of the agents got intimidated about larger properties, my simple response was, well, go ahead and refer it to this agent. It's what they do. They know about larger parcels and the ins and outs. Don't stress yourself. And maybe I should be a little clear if you don't know a little bit about real estate and transactions. This is also in the legal field too. Attorneys do it all the time, is referrals. And a referral simply is a client would come to me. Maybe it's a client from before that I've worked with, but a client would come to me and say, hey, I have a friend that has a large, in this example, large parcel of property. And if that's not something I would deal with, I'd say, oh, well, hey, there's Sam. Sam in our office deals with large parcels of property. In fact, they're the expert in large parcels of property. I'm going to refer you to my fellow agent, Sam, because I want you to get all of the benefits of working with the best agent dealing with large land property. I want you to have the greatest amount of protection, knowing all the ins and outs of contractual law and sale with large parcels of property. And I'm going to give your information to Sam. Sam's going to contact you and go through the process. Sam goes through the process, lists the property, property goes to contract, property goes to sale. Now, because I've given Sam your information, this is where the term referral comes in. And that's where Sam would give me a portion of their commission, their earned income from that transaction, because I gave them a client. This is big in the attorney world. If an attorney says that they don't specialize in something, well, they're going to delicately hand you to an agent or an attorney who specifically does that type of law, that type of sale, that type of transaction for the exchange or a small portion of what they've earned, the commission, the legal fee. I was a huge proponent of that in the office, especially for newer agents. It's like, while you're busy doing something, someone else is also making you some money. That's really not a bad way to build your business. And if you want to be the expert in land, then maybe shadow them and learn a little bit from them, and you can become the expert too. But I always tried to learn what it was that each agent wanted to do, what they specialized in, what they cared to do, and allow them to be that specialty. And recommend that other agents, if it's something, there's plenty of business to go around, is what I always said. So feel free to refer out stuff that you can't handle, stuff that is not your expertise. And we did, and we were extremely successful in doing it. Now, if you wanted to be that agent that tackled all facets of real estate, well, then, more power to you. But part of creating that really good and secure environment, I found that there was less stress involved and less overwhelmed as far as agents in the office by allowing somewhere for that overflow to go and not feel like they were missing something or losing out or having to, juggle too many things. There was always a go-to person that could handle it, or to even provide the resources inter-office that it wasn't so overwhelming by having the administrative assistant there to help them with some of the daily stuff and the just the paperwork shuffle that goes on with so much of the real estate transactions being on that topic. You want to align with your chosen approach and your organization's strengths and market opportunities uncovered in these previous steps, as I mentioned. That was our strength, was our diversity, and that we had land agents, we had in-town agents that knew a little bit about the town zoning. We had agents that dealt with strictly recreational homes. That was our strength, and not just having next agent on the list, here you go, and you got someone that either knew what they were doing or not. We didn't do that. It was, what are you looking for, understanding your basic needs, and then giving you the best agent. And quite frankly, everyone was very successful because everyone was working within their strengths. We developed tactics and action plans. We broke down the actionable steps that agents had to take. with each one of the transactions. And that's what you need to do as well. What are the actionable steps for each one of your projects in your business? You also want to assign responsibilities, and that may entail a budget and a timeline. This is going to ensure accountability and clarity for those that are involved in your business. Again, I'm sticking a little bit to real estate. I'm kind of floating down that river today, but you can apply this to anything, even to your life. You know, if you want to get your finances straight, one of the things you need to do is assign responsibility. Second thing you need to do is create a budget. And the next thing you need to do is within that budget, say, okay, in a timeline, I'm going to have my finances in order to do, you know, what you want to do. If you want to buy a new car, you want to buy a house. Like I said, these business steps and tactics and plans can apply to life as well as in business. The next step is secure buy-in and resources. You want to communicate the plan. Present a strategic plan clearly to everyone, to your stakeholders, your employees, partners, investors. In this case, it was the agents. In the previous mentioned budget, hey, this may be a little family get-together, a sit-down to say, look, we're going to get our budget straight. You may ask for things we may not go get. We may not have the ability to make those purchases. But by not making that purchase, here's what we can have. As a personal example, I know many times the agents would ask for certain marketing or for certain things. And we would be quite upfront and clear with them to say, yes, that's on the radar, but we can't do it now. It is in the future. We're doing these strategic steps now in order to give us the ability to do this in the future. And quite frankly, once they knew that and they understood that it was at least in conversation and on the radar, you know, there wasn't so much resentment as almost wanting to participate, almost eager to say, how can I help? So if I get 5 more sales this year, this will help. If I can get 5 more sales this quarter, this can help with my contribution to the business to enable us to do this activity. Absolutely. And again, it was that sharing with them the strategic plan, kind of giving them that buy-in, if you will, that they utilize their resources, their time, their energy to help participate in the end goal, which was, quite frankly, to make us the best office in town. And by this, it allowed us to allocate our resources wisely to ensure that teams had the budget, that each one of the agents had the tools and the personnel to execute their tasks effectively. In fact, we were so busy and so successful that we implemented a second administrative assistant in order to just keep things organized because we were doing so much business. And it was determined from that meeting that an assistant was more beneficial to the business than, say, an additional agent. Because then you were splitting the pie up even more, as far as all the marketing would then go to an additional party. So what we found was the weakest or time-consuming process was more of the filing and organization and scheduling, and to be able to help the agents that were involved, that did buy in, that were participating, by helping them with kind of the daily, allowed them to go out and be better agents in the field. That was more beneficial to the business at that time. So allocate your resources wisely. And again, understanding your why, knowing your focus, and knowing where you want to be helps. Like, you always want to kind of throw those at the wall of those three things. Know your why. Why you're in business. You want to know what your end goal is, where you want to be, and always follow that vision. And every time we came to a decision, we would put it against those three questions. And each time, as long as it fit within those three, we implemented it. And that was part of our process. We also executed with discipline and adaptability. Many decisions were difficult, and it took sometimes, lots of restraint to not just go out and do it all. But each time we implemented something, we rolled it out in manageable chunks, and it allowed us to track the progress. It also allowed us to make those course corrections because it was the one thing we were doing. When we implemented that new marketing thing, when we started sharing this feature that our office offered, that we were kind of aware, all being from different offices, that others weren't providing, we rolled it out. And it was also part of our feedback process that not everyone had been doing at the time either, to understand, did clients and customers appreciate this feature, this benefit we were providing? And if they said we appreciated it, but, well, that wasn't a bad thing. We took that but and made that correction. Was it good? First of all, for the clients and customers, and obviously because they were asking for it, it was. And second of all, was it good for business? And if it was really kind of a no-brainer, but it allowed us to make those small course corrections rather than kind of throwing many things out, doing lots of marketing, doing lots of sales, doing lots of flyers. Well, you don't know which one's working, which one's effective. So during this implementation phase, kind of, keep it manageable, measurable activities that you can make those corrections. And then once you kind of have something honed in where it's running, say on autopilot, if you will, that it's working, you've kind of worked out the bugs, you know what the return on that investment is, well, then, start the next thing and go into the next phase of your business. And the same thing, something manageable, something measurable, implement it, get some feedback, see how you can adjust it. And once that becomes part of your norm, it becomes measurable, well, then you take the next step. And once you get 3 or 4 of these going, oh my goodness, your business is on a roll, because it's easier knowing that if you do something, what your feedback and your return is, as well as what it cost your business to do as far as that action. And maybe some things don't cost anything, it's just implementing them. But again, you don't want to just sort of throw things out there and implement half a dozen things and then realize that half of those half dozen really didn't work. Find out that they don't work and then reel them back in, and either determine why they didn't work and how they can be adjusted, or just realize it's not the best fit for your business. And then you're not even spending any time, energy, or resources towards something like that in your business. And use a little bit of the project management mindset to keep things organized and on schedule. The administrative assistant that we had, she was wonderful. Tabby was a beautiful soul. and she was always spot on. And she would say, hey, this isn't being implemented. How can we ensure that clients and customers are giving us feedback in a timely manner so that we can associate it with that transaction? Especially with some of the investors we worked with. I mean, they were doing 2, 3 transactions a quarter, especially during this foreclosure stage. There was a lot of inventory on the market that was easily had just because of the ability for the profit margin. That being said, when they did have not so good feedback and they didn't give it to us until several months later, well, we needed to associate it with actually which transaction wasn't the best. And that way we could effectively make those changes and adjustments. Maybe it was coaching the agent. Maybe it was a step that was missed on our part. Maybe it was something that wasn't implemented as it should, and a step was skipped. And it wasn't what we promised the client and customer. And that's kind of on us. But again, it was measurable, and it allowed us to know exactly when. So that timely feedback was important. And once we realized that, we put it in place and made it happen. And that just takes me into the next step is you got to maintain flexibility. Don't be so rigid that you don't make those adjustments. You want to stay alert for the changes in the market within your organization. If there's certain feedback that just isn't going to, or certain methods, I guess, of obtaining that feedback just aren't working in your marketplace, find out what works. Because getting that information from your client and customer is important as far as growing your business and knowing what it is they want and how they want it, providing to them ultimately the best service that you can. And adapt those strategies and tactics that are necessary, ensuring that you don't lose sight of your core objectives, which is, again, going back to the beginning, what was your goal? What's your why? Why are you doing something? What is it that you ultimately want to achieve? And continuously staying focused on that. But again, being flexible. It's kind of interesting. Being the best agency in town seemed like kind of a big step at the time. And, certain things that came in place reminded us that maybe we weren't. And that was frustrating. But by being alert and by being kind of on the pulse of the market and constantly asking clients and customers, even if they had the best transaction ever, what would make it better? We got some really interesting feedback from that. What would make it better? If we did everything we knew at the time to be the best, what would have made it better? Well, if you could implement this, if this option was available, oh my gosh, okay, well, let's go figure out how to get that option available so that we can provide that to our clients and customers. And did that option cost some money for the business to implement? Was it a free option? Not to mention, by putting that option in place, what's the training that we would now have to give our agents so that they could effectively use that tool to benefit our clients and customers? These were all things that came up at the board meeting when we were having this discussion. And again, you can apply this to anything. Say in your business, you're implementing a new piece of software or a new app that all of your team is going to start using. Well, what's the implementation to not only put it in place, and does it require a new device? Does it require an app that they're going to have to download on their phone? Is it going to require a whole new software upgrade? Is their computer going to be able to manage it? Is the in-house computer at the office going to be able to handle having something like this in place? Do you now have to have cloud storage in order for this to be in place? All of these things may or may not add to the expense of implementation. And then the time and energy put in place to train each one of your agents and team members to utilize this tool. And is it all ultimately worth it when you're looking at what's your core objective, what's your why. And if your why is to be the best at something, then of course the infrastructure, if you have to purchase some items, the app, the building of the app, as well as the maintenance of the app and the adjustments, periodical adjustments to the app. If all of these things are part of your core objective and are going to help you get there, again, that goes back to one of your small measurable steps that you implement. You take all of these steps to get it in place and then measure your return. If it worked effectively and you find other ways to adapt your app that's client and customer friendly, or it's what they're looking for, well, again, those are your key indicators to make those adjustments. But again, being flexible to say, hey, here's our overall objective, and this is going to help us get there, that's great. On the flip side, if you go through all the analysis and realize it's a very expensive tool to use and the training for agents and it's just overwhelming and you don't see the return, well, then it's not a good fit for your core objective and it doesn't follow through with your why. And here's a shocking thing. Maybe you have to say no to something if it's not a good fit for your business and your strategic planning for where you're trying to go. But also be flexible to not write something like that off and say it's no good, I don't want to utilize it. Put it in your back pocket. It might be something you could utilize later. Maybe at the next level financially that you could move forward with a tool like that. So don't completely write things off. And as I just mentioned, which is our next step, is monitor, measure, and refine. Your key performance indicators, KPI, as many people like to call it for short, is define your measurable indicators. And again, it goes back to that previous example of, is this going to create revenue growth? Is it going to build customer satisfaction? And is it going to help ensure a greater gain in market share? Track your performance against these goals. And if a tool like this, as previously mentioned, is going to utilize all of those, mentioned, the customer satisfaction, market share, if that's going to help build all that, well, then it's worth it for the time and energy of training and implementing and cloud storage and all the stuff that comes with it. Somebody to adjust the code that's part of your business, to invest the upfront cost to get that into your team's hands. If that's the cost of entry, that's pretty inexpensive. If it's going to give you all three of those measurable events. Seems to me it's well worth it. But you also keep in mind, you want to review the metrics regularly, engage whether or not you're on target or whether you need to pivot. Does this tool have all the features, or do you need to go back to the creators of this app and say, hey, we need more tools? Or before you make that big purchase, you maybe do some research. I did countless amounts of research to understand, and this was early 2000s, of what search engine optimization was. Oh man, I read books and the hashtags and just, yeah, anytime somebody talked to me, it was all about search engine marketing. And now, I mean, that was Google in its infancy as far as the development of all that. Now it's there, it's out there, and there's proven strategies that have worked like that and tools that are in place that help ensure that search engine marketing and to give it its authenticity. Back in the day, you could, as long as you had basically a system that was putting information out there, gave you credibility. Now they're verifying that information, so you can't just throw information out there, just as an example. But that was one of the levels, I won't say that we went to, but it was an option to kind of make you look bigger than you really were by having all this search engine optimization out there that just made you look like you were everywhere. And I didn't want to be everywhere. I wanted to be the go-to source for that area, to know that we were your one-stop shop. And if you realized, I'll give you an example, in this mid-Atlantic area, the Potomac River flowed through many of these states and counties. And the interesting part was one side was one state, the other side of the river was another state. So it was defining the borders of these states. And if you went to a specific area and said, wow, I really like this location, but that side of the river is better. Well, now we're talking a whole nother piece of real estate in a whole nother state. I know for some people, if you live in a very large state and you're in the middle of it, it's kind of hard to comprehend, but this was the world that we lived in, which is still available. I shouldn't say it in past tense, but having the ability to go, oh, you want to look on that side of the river? Great. I'm licensed there. Let's go look. That was hugely beneficial in this real estate world. So when I reviewed the understanding that our clients and customers wanted that ability, when they wanted to have that individual that could take them almost anywhere, especially after you had the conversation of what are you looking for and what does that entail? Well, that started to define where we were looking. And the same thing, once you understand what your client and customer is looking for, well, you need to adapt and be in that position to flex and to pivot and to be on target to give your client and customer exactly what they want. Again, the SEO world at the time had the ability to look bigger. I just wanted to ensure that clients and customers knew that when they came to our establishment, that we had the agents that specialized in land, we had the agents that specialized in commercial property, that we had the agents that could help with recreational homes, because it was such a diverse area that we had that ability to meet every single one of their needs. And it wasn't like going to the dealership and saying, I want this particular car and this is, or I'm open to car options, but they only sell this particular car and nothing else. So, and that as you go to dealerships, they have a diverse kind of car because they realize that customers out there are diverse. You end up with a specific dealership, before you know it, you're driving something that's not that dealership. And maybe it was because of the financial options were more favorable to get a used car, which is something they had, or your financial options were more favorable for a new car. And anybody in sales will tell you they don't want to see you go down the street and buy anything from anybody else. If you're on their lot, they want to sell you something. So, that's kind of their pivot. That's their metrics. That's what they live by. So be flexible and understand your client and customer and what you can provide to them and how best to implement those changes. And monitor what's working through your KPIs. And if something's not working, make those adjustments so that it does work. And if it's not working after those adjustments and analysis, well, then you got to come to that hard decision that it's not something that should be implemented. And then, man, you really got to figure out how to let that go. And anybody that's maybe let someone go in their life or lost something that they valued, it's a tough decision to make. But I've always said you really want to kind of tackle the monster when it's small. So by learning that something doesn't work when it's little is a far better advantage than it getting too big and then having to cut those strings and then having to sever those relationships, because then There's way too many cords to cut, and that gets messy. So watch your KPIs, those key performance indicators, and if something's just not working, yeah, let it go, break it up. Or if it's just not working at the time, realize that and set yourself up with that measurable time period to say, okay, let's try implementing it again when we're at this position where it's more suitable. But do that when it's small. It's much easier when it's small than when it gets too big. And as I've mentioned several times in this training, is continuous feedback. Encourage honest feedback from not only your teams, but your stakeholders, your clients and customers. Use these lessons learned from each phase, from each step, to refine your process and shift your priorities and change your tactics in real time. Make those adjustments. And, you can find yourself changing course and just jumping all over the map. I guess I should be clear to say, when you get consistent feedback, monitor, measure, and refine. If somebody just maybe had a bad experience, figure out why and make that small implementation. Maybe it's just a team member. Maybe it's the sales associate. Maybe it's just that small nuance of an occurrence that happened. If it's continuous, where you keep seeing the same repetitive statement from different individuals, then it may be how you're doing business. And maybe that as a whole, with your entire team, with your organization, that you need to implement maybe a training session to make that larger adjustment. Maybe it's just the way you're doing business and you're doing it a little different than anyone else, which isn't always a bad thing. I know we went against the grain several times, but again, we were an independent company, not being controlled by a corporation, which had their own rules. And that gave us a huge amount of freedom to do many things that they weren't able to do. And that's what gave us a competitive advantage in this real estate world, for example, is that we didn't have those corporate restraints that our competitor had with branding and marketing and what they needed to do. And all that's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I found that it had certain constraints during this time. And the most beneficial thing that I could provide to those agents, our stockholders, if you will, was to give them the freedom to market themselves and be the best themselves. And we were flexible to change in real time as needed through that process. So I hope that you found each one of these 7 steps to be valuable in your business and or to apply to your personal life. Strategic planning is an ongoing cyclical process. Rather than a one-time event, by following these structured steps, defining your vision, analyzing your environment, and setting clear objectives, formulating and communicating your strategy, and continually measuring results, you'll lay out a robust foundation for sustainable success. The secret lies in continuous adaptation and alignment. Keep your eyes on the long-term vision while staying flexible enough to respond to new challenges and opportunities along the way. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed this episode, Secrets of Strategic Planning, Mastering the Steps for Effective Execution. If you found value in this episode, click like or subscribe to the channel. Certainly would appreciate that effort on your part. And if you found enough value that you feel you could share this with a colleague, a coworker, maybe a business partner, maybe you learned something new that you didn't know that you're adapting into your business now. If you could give us some feedback, again, as I mentioned, feedback is huge to let us know that we can continue to provide even more episodes like this or to dive deeper into some of the strategic steps that you can take to take your business to the next level. Again, always seek knowledge, and thank you for spending some time with us. And remember, make it a great day.